Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful afternoon if you're in New York City. It's another lovely sunny day. We appreciate you being here. We are going to go ahead and get started as folks join us. So welcome again to day one, part two of Face2Face 2024. This panel is Arts Education Advocacy from the Top Down. We're happy that you're here with us. My name is Kinsey Keck. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman with brown hair that goes just a little bit past my shoulders. I'm wearing some large round wire framed glasses and a charcoal gray t-shirt. And my background is blurred. I am also the programs director here at the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable. For those who don't know, the Roundtable is a grassroots service organization that works to improve and advance the state of arts education through professional development workshops, advocacy, and online resources and platforms to connect you all in the arts education field. Although we are currently meeting online via Zoom today, the Roundtable would like to acknowledge that we work and live on unceded lands. Mannahatta, or the place widely known as New York City, exists on the contemporary and ancestral homelands of the Canarsie, Munsee Lenape, and Wappinger people. These sovereign nations and communities are still thriving here, and we continue to occupy their lands. So we would like to give a moment of respect to them, as well as to the Black and immigrant communities which have helped build the city that we know today. As we recognize that all of our pasts, presents, and futures are intertwined, we would like to lift up, again, a handful of contemporary Indigenous arts organizations that we feel that we can all support and learn from. So if you haven't before, please save these links, take a little time, learn about these organizations, support them with donations if you can. And I also welcome you to share any organizations that you would like to uplift with folks on the call in the chat as well. Thank you. I also really have to mention again and say thanks to the Face2Face 2024 sponsors. We are just so incredibly grateful to these folks for supporting the conference. And actually, I think I have the wrong slide up to acknowledge the folks today who brought you this session specifically, which we are so grateful to. And yes, here they are. So again, this conference would not be possible without the support of our very generous sponsors. We are so grateful to them. So this session specifically is brought to you all today by Global Arts to Go and Get Empowered, which are two sister organizations, as well as Arts Connection, and then the National Dance Institute's Collaborative for Teaching and Learning. So big thanks to those folks. You'll be hearing more about our sponsors throughout the conference, and you can also learn more about them and get links to their websites and other resources related to our sponsors on the Face2Face website. All right, just a couple more reminders before we get started. So if you're having trouble with Zoom at all, please feel free to send me a direct message. My name is Kinsey, and I am here to help. Please remember to keep your mic on mute unless you are the person speaking. We do encourage you as an attendee to use the chat. You can share questions in the chat, connect with other folks on the call. We hope to have some time to answer those questions, so please pop them in and we will save them when it is time. And I also want to acknowledge that the meeting does include live ASL interpretation as well as automatic closed captions via Zoom. So if you'd like to activate your automated captions, look at your toolbar. There should be a button that says captions or show captions. That may also be under your more with the ... buttons on your toolbar, and you can activate them there. And last, this session is being recorded, and it will be made available to you all after the conclusion of the Face2Face conference. It does take us a little bit of time to turn that around, so please be patient with us, but just know you will receive an email from me with all the resources and links related to all of our virtual sessions as soon as the conference concludes. And that is enough of that. It is my sincere pleasure to start bringing on our panelists for today. We've got a great group of folks, and I'm going to be spotlighting them as we go and bringing them so that you can see them all. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jennifer Katona. She is the Executive Director of the Educational Theater Association. We also have Susan McGreevy-Nichols, Executive Director at the National Dance Education Organization, Mario Rossero, Executive Director at the National Art Education Association, and Christopher Woodside, Executive Director at the National Association for Music Education. Welcome, everybody. Oh, this was my job. Let me bring Chris on. Sorry about that. All right, we are all here. Thank you all so much for being here. I pass the mic. We're really excited. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kinsey, and thank you, Kim, and welcome everybody. It is a beautiful day wherever you are. We're going to take a minute and have you participate in the chat so we can get to see who's in the room, but we wanted to take a moment and introduce ourselves. As Kinsey said, I'm Jen Katona. I'm the Executive Director of the Educational Theater Association. And really briefly, the Educational Theater Association is a membership organization for theater educators of all ages, of whatever classroom that puts you in, a community center, a classroom, after school, in school. And we are committed to supporting our theater educators so that you can be the best educators for your students. So I'm going to pass it over to Susan and then Mario and Chris, and then we'll get to know you all.
Hi there, I'm Susan McGreevy-Nichols, and I am the Executive Director, CEO of the National Dance Education Organization. I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mario. Okay.
Thanks, Sue. Good to see everyone. Good afternoon. Mario Rossero. I've got the privilege and honor of being the Executive Director of the National Art Education Association, and we serve all of the visual arts, design, media arts educators across the country and internationally. In K-12, community, museum spaces, higher ed, pre-service, you name it, they're part of our family. So, Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, everybody. My name is Chris Woodside. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association for Music Education. We are a national association of roughly 57,000 music educators from across the country and other parts of the world. And NAFME is a collaborative community that supports music educators and advocates for equitable access to music education. Delighted to be here.
Thanks, everybody. So some of you have already started in the chat, and we're going to follow your lead. There's a lot of you, so we're going to try to look at these quickly. But if you could put in the chat your name, your association, if you're here with representing a specific association, and the art form. And maybe it's multiple art forms, and that's great. But we'd be curious to see who's in our space today. And you can put that in the chat. And the second question, as people are finishing up that one, is what art form, if you haven't already put that there? Some of you have. Are you representing, or maybe it's all? And is there a question or a particular reason you came today? Is there something you were hoping to get out of this session? If you want to put that in the chat as well. Great. So here we are. Everybody see that okay? So here we are in our agenda. Introductions is what we are in the process of doing now. We're going to talk about some of the different approaches to advocacy. We have the big A and the little a. We know that we can advocate all the way up to the top of our legislation and break down into our classrooms and the stuff we do day to day and with individuals that we speak to. So we're going to talk about that. Where are our spheres of influence? Who has the power to move the needle in those different spaces? What are the different focused advocacy that each of our organizations are doing? And what can we do together to help support all of the arts education that's happening mainly in New York City, where many of you are, but all over the country. And then we'll close out with questions along the way. We'll give specific time at the end for questions and make sure you have all our contact information so that the conversations can continue. Before we get into the deepness of the work, I'm going to toss it over to Chris to talk to us a little bit about the importance of the four organizations coming together to talk about arts education and the difference between advocacy and lobbying. Chris?
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this topic because I know all four of us with you today have been looking forward to spreading the news that we are working very closely together. Our organizations and art forms are working very closely together our members, teachers in the field are working closely together. Arts educators, as those of you joining us today know, are passionate about the arts, all of them. And I think that's why it's really a wonderful development that these 4 organizations have come together and said on a variety of fronts, we would like to collaborate because we are trying to support arts educators, be they dance, theater, visual, music, media arts, all arts educators. And so in that spirit, we are collaborating when it comes to advocacy. We are having conversations about professional development. We're starting to talk about things like artificial intelligence. The 4 of us talk with regularity, and our members and leaders know each other, are getting to know each other better. We're looking for those overlaps anywhere that we can find them. It's a message we want to bring to all of you today because I think it's something that can be echoed very effectively when you talk, Jen, about the big A advocacy and the little a, can be echoed very effectively at the community level. And it's a great model for how advocacy, in my opinion, is most effective. So having been with the National Association for Music Education for quite a bit now, I can say, and I think we all know this through our different arts discipline lenses, there have been different perspectives and different moments in time where arts advocacy has been conducted in a variety of different fashions. And what we're here to say together today is that we want this to be a collaborative venture at the federal level, and we strongly endorse arts advocacy collaboration at the community level as well. We think that that's a very powerful way of conducting the work, and it supports all arts educators and all arts education. Beyond that, the other point that I want to quickly touch on is the meaning of lobbying, because in all my years doing this work, and most of my background is actually in public policy. So at one point I was doing that work specifically for NAFME, and previous to that, I worked on Capitol Hill for a while. Lobbying can be a word that scares people because there are connotations attached to it. And do I have to be a lobbyist, and do I have to report my activity, and all that kind of stuff sort of comes into play. What's important for everyone joining us today to know is that nonprofit organizations like the Arts Education Service discipline organizations joining you today can indeed engage in what's called issue-based lobbying. So NAFME hires a couple of lobbyists who go to Capitol Hill and advocate on behalf of arts education. And that is perfectly legal and acceptable and complies with all laws. Where there is a difference between the type of lobbying activity that our organizations are interested in conducting on behalf of arts education and other types of lobbying is when you hear about a lobbyist or a lobbying firm that is maybe doing work on behalf of a political candidate, campaigning on behalf of a candidate who is a representative of one political party or another, or maybe conducting a fundraising activity for a candidate or a political party. Our organizations, the organizations represented on screen today, do not do that type of lobbying. We do issue-based lobbying because arts education is not a partisan issue. We all support arts education, and so that is the type of lobbying that together, as I mentioned before, we collaborate on.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to go back to my slideshow really briefly and take us into the rest of the presentation. Oops, nope. The little triangle, there we go. I'm going to toss it over to Mario in a moment to talk about the different ecosystems, but I want to just frame it by reminding everybody, as Chris said, that there are so many levers that we can pull on with advocacy. So we can talk at the federal level around legislation. We have our state level, your local community levels. New York City is a very robust, smaller sector, even within the state of New York. Your schools, your districts, your associations, and as I said earlier, your classrooms, the parents, the caretakers, the students one-to-one, your principals. These are all various levels of advocacy. What's exciting about the 4 of us coming together is that we can have a stronger impact when we do lobby and advocate at the federal level. And that's the sphere of our influence. But Mario is going to talk a little bit more about the arts education ecosystem and where we all fit into it.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Hello again, everybody. I was thinking about our conversation today, and, it talks about from the top down, but I think all of us have such roots in the classroom that we like to say from the classroom out, and really think about, and this, classroom, studio, lab, theater space, wherever those spaces are, I like to think from that on the ground work outward to think about how do we best support and uplift the stories of everybody. So you're going to see a couple slides here that essentially, if you like rows and columns, you're going to like this slide. If you like circles and spheres, you're going to like the next slide. But they talk about the arts education ecosystem. So you probably think a lot about this, whether you're based in New York or elsewhere, about where is your role within that ecosystem, and essentially the work in advocating and championing arts education literally takes all of us locking arms, working on this and telling our stories of impact on young people, on communities, and really uplifting those constantly. And it really takes all of us to do that. So clearly we have a big focus on students, but when you look at that local level, that's where you see our practitioners that are in classrooms and studios, art teachers and teaching artists, but you also see a lot of those decision makers in there, whether that's your school board, your principal, maybe it's your community organizations, it could even be local foundations. And it's how does that local environment function, or maybe not function, but how might it function to effectively support the arts? And then, of course, you have all your state level work. So each of our organizations, we have state affiliates all over the country that also have their own organizations, and we work hand in hand. But at the state level, really thinking about, is there a policy lever that you're concerned about? Oftentimes when we're thinking about the arts in schools, you're looking at graduation requirements tend to be, some of the most powerful state policy levers, but there's also many things that have to do with where funding may go to benefit students, whether it's Title I or Title IV. But you can see that there's many, many layers there, from the legislator all the way down to various organizations that might be your state arts advocacy organization. And of course, federally, that's really where we function the most, even though we advise at the state and local levels. I love that this starts with the White House. Most of the time, these conversations are happening with staffers on the Hill, with legislators, with representatives. And we are constantly coming together as a larger arts ed ecosystem and arts and cultural sector. So we also have colleagues, in theaters and symphonies and museums that will rally with us to uplift our voices. So we're going to go to the next slide, which is going to say the same thing in a different way. So however your brain might receive this best, but it's really thinking about that every ring in this circle, it's a ripple effect. We're focused on students, but we need every ring around that to really work hand in hand. And that's why conversations like this one are so important to us. So I'm going to pass it back to Jen. This is another image. It's slightly different, but it talks about the ecosystem a little bit more.
It does, yeah. And I would also add to that, Mario, and something that someone said to me years ago that I found really helpful that I'll share with this group is my brain likes this image the best. So it's also looking at where you find yourself. So if everybody takes a moment and looks at it and kind of identifies which sphere they're at, and that you typically have influence, a sphere above or a sphere below, right? So that sometimes helps you know where to target your energy, and not to say that you can't be advocating above a certain sphere, but if you want to target your energy, we're all so busy. We all want to know, where can I have the most impact? Where can that letter I write or that petition I sign have the most power? A good way of thinking about that is a level up or a level down. This third image for all of us to look at is something called a shared endeavor, and it is a belief system that all arts organizations, the four of us at the national level, and I'll paint with a wide brush and assume many of you in this Zoom room as well, believe that the most powerful impact of an arts education comes from this shared work of the certified arts teacher, the cultural partner and the teaching artist, and the community arts that are provided. So going to see theater, going to a gallery, going to a dance presentation, hearing, going to a symphony concert, whatever the experience may be, combined with the certified arts instruction and the cultural partner, that is the most powerful way for a student to access a strong arts education. And that is what we speak about with a shared voice when we speak at the national level about how we're advocating for arts education. And it's a nice way for us to be grounded in the work. And I think it's nice for everyone to know that this is the lens in which we're speaking about the work at the national level. Susan, Mario, Chris, would like to add anything to these 3 slides?
The only thing I'd say is just remind the QR codes will take you right to the link. And someone just requested the slide deck, and we'll try to make that available.
Absolutely. We'll give that to Kinsey. Yep.
And this one, there's some work to update this because clearly our ecosystem is ever changing. So we don't have the new version approved yet. But if you have any feedback, we'll be happy to receive that in the chat and pass it on to the folks that are working on that.
Sue,
Thank
go
you.
ahead if you'd like.
Say that again? I didn't hear him.
Sue, did you want to jump in?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. I was just going to add quickly, I think that these slides are a wonderful reflection of the conversation we were having a few moments ago, and that our work together at the federal level is really a natural evolution of what you can clearly see here is a combined effort on behalf of arts education organizations across the country.
So a little more of me talking, but I wanted to give a top level overview of some of the federal policies and legislation that are currently in practice and that we are putting our support behind at the national level that are important for you all to know. So the first, and hopefully this is not terribly new to some people, but is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, often known as ESSA, in the reauthorization in 2015, retitled the Every Student Succeeds Act. And the item in this, which is a lengthy document that we want to elevate, is that ESSA shifts the language of core subjects to a well-rounded education, and in that the arts are specifically named. And that's important because it gives us leverage in the various funding sources that I'm going to talk about next. This is an important thing that I learned fairly recently that I think is important for us to think about when we're situating and thinking about where our positions of power are and where our positions of leverage are. The federal government only contributes to about 7% of the national spending on education, which means the remaining 93% is coming from state and local ventures. So where do you want to put your advocacy work at your state and local levels is your most targeted area, which I know the Roundtable does a lot of really great work in that area. And sometimes you think, oh, maybe we should be talking to, Congress or this, we should really be putting our energy there, and really putting your energy at the local level is your most direct impact because, as this slide indicates, that is where the majority of the funding decisions are made. So some good news in funding, if you'll see on the right-hand side where it says funding amount, I'll go through the programs in a moment, but you can see that everything for the next fiscal year has either been level set funding, which means we did not lose any funding, or in some cases, a very slight increase in the funding that we are receiving. So Title I is what we call an entitlement grant. Title I, Title II, and Title IV are all federal entitlement grants, which means that they are automatically given to the states. It's based on a percentage, and it's typically based on how many families in the land above or below the poverty line. So that is based on a percentage, and states automatically get that. You do not have to apply for that. What's important for us to know about Title I, Title II, and Title IV is that oftentimes this money is a pocket of money that arts education can speak to their districts and local schools to get access to. So Title I is general education spending. Title II is professional development for teachers. And Title IV is our most important pot of money because that is for student support and academic achievement grants. And in that specifically, in addition to health and well-being and technology, is providing a well-rounded education. And because ESSA names the arts as a subject of a well-rounded education, the arts are a prime focus for what that money can be spent for. And a lot of schools will spend their Title IV money on what they refer to as enrichment programs, but are typically your arts programs, often your after-school arts programs. But if you are speaking to districts and you are targeting federal entitlement grants, Title IV is a great area for you to be advocating for. There's IDA, which is students with disabilities, and then arts and education. These are the assistance for arts education grants. Arts and education and the Lowry grant you see below are competitive grants, which means states do have to apply directly for them. You're not guaranteed that you will receive them. And they are for, you may have heard of the model development and dissemination grants. New York City's received those a few times. Those are typically larger structural grants. So maybe you want to think about a new assessment program for the arts that might fall under an AMD grant. I hear someone's thing on. Or professional development, or there's smaller arts-based grants, but those all fall under the assistance in arts education grants. And then the Century Community Learning Grants are for smaller communities where they're supporting Title I schools in improving, particularly around literacy. That's a big focus, but we all know arts have a strong impact in literacy. And sometimes that's an area where you can be partnering with a state or a school district to get access to some of that funding. If you want to work, if a program you have might be serving a need that they have, if they are receiving those federal funds. We'll give this slideshow and you will have access to all of this. A little bit more about, and I won't read these. Again, this will be a slide that we will provide to you, but just to say that the arts are alive and are talked about quite a bit at the federal level, which is really exciting. Our arts organizations have all signed on in support of these 4 bills that are currently in discussion at the legislation level. Arts Education for All, Susan Bonamici is probably our biggest representative in support of arts education. And this, as you can see, would provide grants to support arts integration, which is the first time I've seen an arts integration specifically laid out, which is really exciting. The Guaranteed Access to Arts and Music Education Act from Cory Booker and Nydia Velasquez. I'm a former Brooklyn teacher, so Nydia was a big supporter of the arts when I was a teacher in Brooklyn, so she has carried that with her. And again, this would help provide access, which is exciting about this one is a call out to PD and resources, which is often not the case. There's the HBCU Arts Education Act, which would provide direct financial aid and development programs and apprenticeships for arts education specifically at HBCUs. And then Reimagining Inclusive Arts Education Act, which would provide arts education for students with disabilities. And I think, Chris, this came out of some advocacy work that NAFME did, right? And we do these Hill Days often through our organizations where our members will go directly to Capitol Hill and advocate for different various legislation. And sometimes those conversations have a real impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Jen. What's wonderful to see just in reviewing these different pieces of legislation is that there is a connection between arts advocates going to Capitol Hill, as Jen mentioned, and having meetings with members of Congress and staff, building those connections, making an impact, being seen and heard, and then seeing these pieces of legislation start to emerge, sometimes, hopefully, in a bipartisan fashion, and garner support. And again, the spirit in which all of the subject matter discipline organizations are working together to support this legislation, and arts educators from all the different disciplines can work together to support them both on the Hill and back at home through advocacy campaigns, phone calls, emails. It's wonderful. And that spirit is what's leading this work.
That's a great segue to our next set of slides to you, Mario, another place where the 4 organizations have been able to come together and have a really strong impact.
Great, thank you all. So this may ring familiar to your New York ears, based off of over a decade of investment from the Arts and Education grants in New York City in the Office of Arts and Special Projects. They had multiple rounds of supporting professional learning communities across all arts disciplines in New York City public schools. So our good friends and colleagues there, when this opportunity came up a few years ago, right at the, I think 2020 to 21, that special moment in time, we all hunkered down and thought, how might we work from New York's great foundation and build a national professional learning community? So essentially, long story short, each of the art forms worked to identify 17 teacher leaders across the country in each arts discipline. And we, based off the New York City model, really invested in their acumen and their skills in implementing equity, diversity, inclusion practices, social emotional learning strategies, and also uplifting the arts teacher leadership, because we know those are the things that students and teachers and communities are facing. And the notion is that if we are able to invest in those strategies through the arts, we can increase the value proposition for the arts at all those schools. So next slide. Thank you very much. And you can just see, we have a focus on students, teachers, partnerships, and resources. One of the two of the exciting things that will come out of this project, in addition to the great learning that's happening across those teacher leaders, is that we'll be producing a partnership guidebook and also sort of a school level guide toolbox that will, all the tools and strategies that we're developing for working with teachers across the country, looking at your curriculum, embedding those strategies will be part of the outcome. And if we go to the next slide. This kind of gives you a sense of, we started with 15 national plus 2 New York for every cohort, about a year and a half of investment in those national professional learning communities. And then this past fall into winter, we sort of grew like gremlins. I feel like we just added a drop of water, and suddenly we added, next slide, over 454 teacher participants. So now we have our teacher leaders are leading these PLCs across the country. This whole story is really about how we can work together to leverage an investment in the arts to have the broadest impact. So if we have nearly 500 national teachers working at the national level across arts disciplines, just think how many students that they're actually reaching and serving through these strategies. So our idea is that we can not only position the arts to be in a more respected and valued place in the school, but also when you get teachers together across state lines, we suddenly are hearing and learning more about what folks really face locally. There's many of the common issues, right? Budget, scheduling, supplies, partnership, all those things are constant struggles. But in this world of the divisive concept laws and state-by-state legislation that folks are navigating, what's really been fascinating is how we're coming together as a national community to problem solve. And for anyone that has a strategy locally can share that with their cohort or colleagues and take that work a little bit further. So anyways, we're in the 3rd of 5 years of that grant. We are all, I think, in agreement that we want to continue this work for the next round and grow it even further. So, if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. You can see our numbers here across the art forms, including media arts as well. And this also gives a shout out to our New York City folks in Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and Staten Island as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mario. What's nice too about the CAN grant, I can speak from our side, is that it's this shared language through all 5 art forms, the arts education teachers that are coming through that and are really stepping up as leaders in our organizations, which has been really nice. So we've talked a lot about some of the top level legislation and advocacy work that we are engaged in collectively. And then as we get a little deeper into each of our organizations, each art form and each association has specific things that are dedicated to their members. So we're going to take some time and talk about each of those. So we're going to start with NDEO and hand it over to, oh, nope, I lied to you. I'm going to start with NAFME and hand it over to Chris.
Sue would do a better job of NDEO.
Hey, I'll do math before you.
Thank you, Jen.
You're next.
So what I want to speak about briefly at a 40,000 foot level is the mission and vision of NAFME today, which has come into focus within the past couple of years after a tremendous amount of work done by the NAFME National Executive Board and music teachers from all across the country. The mission, as I mentioned before, a collaborative community supporting music educators and advocating for equitable access for music education. And you can see the vision and the belief statement of the association. All of the work that NAFME does in its various areas is a reflection of this strategic plan. And there are a number of projects that have resulted already in really wonderful long-term initiatives of the association that I feel deeply will change the landscape of music education because of the spirit, again, in which the association is pursuing this work. So I have to give a shout out to NAFME's immediate past president, Mackie Spradley, who took the association down an amazing journey during her presidency, examining systemic racism within music education and within our association, resulting in changes to bylaws and policies that ultimately created a NAFME Equity Committee, which has 2 appointed members to the National Executive Board and has looked at every program, project, activity, and initiative of the association through a lens of equity, which is work that continues and now is just part of the way the association will operate, as I said before, in perpetuity. So I think that that is a reflection of the strategic plan from a sort of current event sort of standpoint. I want to mention Mario spoke a moment ago to divisive concepts laws, which I think is probably something that most of us are familiar with in one way or another, but these are laws that are in many ways limiting the ways that teachers can teach in 2024. And they are jurisdictional, and they encompass, I think at this point, at least half the country, if not more, as far as where their impact is being felt. NAFME has amazing researchers that have put together studies on the impact of divisive concept laws. One of our board members, Karen Salvador, I want to give another shout out to Karen, has done a fabulous job. I think she's now talking with our visual arts friends about that work and how it could positively impact what NAEA is trying to do as well. But it's that kind of project-based work that is a reflection of the NAFME strategic plan and advocacy generally, the spirit of responsiveness to the needs of music teachers, arts educators across the country that I think you'll hear today. We're all trying to conduct this work. And Jen, if you could move to the next slide. Thank you. I also want to mention this incredible undertaking led by our president-elect, Dr. Deb Confredo. Actually, our president-elect Cecil Adderley was involved in this work, as well as Carlos Abril, an amazing researcher at University of Miami. They've put together a blueprint for strengthening the music teacher profession. This was based on a task force of music educators that were examining recruitment and retention within the profession. And a lot of this was happening as the country, as we all know, several years ago, began going through really another civil rights movement. And the music education profession began looking at these barriers, systemic barriers to access to the profession, which we know in many ways permeate not just arts education, education as a whole, and our society. But NAFME took very seriously really popping the hood and trying to gain a better understanding of where those barriers are, figuring out those challenges, identifying those challenges, and then trying to come up with mitigating strategies for how we can begin to break down these barriers and create broader access to the music teaching profession. And as the world then went also through a global pandemic, it's really remarkable if we all think about the journey we've been on the past few years and these enormous life-altering challenges. We began feeling the socioeconomic impact of the attrition to the teaching profession, which continues to impact music education, arts education as a whole. And again, part of the research that was done in putting together the blueprint was an examination of how we can bring music teachers into the profession. What barriers can be removed in all facets of the process, from bringing a music student into the classroom to getting them interested in pursuing a teaching profession, getting into the higher ed space, having that be as broad and open a pipeline as possible, so that we are recruiting music students and music educators with interest in all different kinds of music experiences, music forms, and music teaching. And there is a deep commitment within NAFME's leadership, and we know our membership, to expanding that pipeline, expanding access to all different kinds of music teaching and learning. And I'm just so proud that we have this blueprint in place now that members of the music teaching profession can get involved in. I have to make sure that I'm quoting our president-elect Deb Confredo, who talks all the time about homework, the homework that we all have to look at those mitigation strategies and figure out what we can do in our own backyards, in our own communities, to make sure we are expanding access to the music teacher pipeline, to the profession, that we're bringing new students and teachers into music education. So these initiatives are a reflection, these and many more are a reflection of the work that NAFME is doing today. And I am very eager for all of you in attendance to take a look at our website and explore some of these other initiatives. We have an amazing small schools initiative that is started in the last year or two and is bringing together music teachers from all kinds of different settings across the country in schools that maybe have not historically been given the spotlight, simply because the size of the community that they represent and perhaps the lack of resources. But teachers are doing amazing things and they deserve to be in the spotlight. And I know we all in arts education have schools and communities like that that should be in the spotlight and that should be brought to the forefront. And it's these types of responsive initiatives that to me are a reflection of that small a advocacy, looking across the country and seeing who is doing this amazing work in music education and arts education, and then the responsibility of associations like ours to highlight, to bring voice and space to these different communities and topics, and to make great progress on behalf of arts education and arts educators. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. Sue?
So, you know what he said. That was a great presentation. So as you can see, this is our strategic plan, which we started working on in 2022. And this followed right after we did what referred to as our JEDI alignment. So what that was, and it's now called JDEI instead of calling it JEDI. Well, they were a little concerned about Disney getting a little crabby about using that reference. So we actually did an audit of our 11 programs. We had 100 teachers through, you know, they were assigned a section, and to look through these courses using, entities of the programs to see whether or not they were accessible, whether they addressed equity, and just in general, how they lived up to the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion ideas. And as you can see, advocacy is our strategic priority as part of this, and it's a 5-year plan. And you know, it's just been delightful to work on this and to know I have to you know, make sure this all gets done. And as you saw in with NAFME, we also have on this our mission and vision and our value statement. Give me another slide, please. Is there another one? Yeah, there is. Okay. And so you can see this is the more specific aspects and how we're going to accomplish these various strategic priorities. So this is on our website. Again, if you want to learn more about us, there's really a lot on the website. You know, be sure to check it out. So needless to say, we are thrilled to be part of this collaboration with the other national arts organization. For NDEO, the smallest of organizations, this advocacy effort puts us on an even footing with other organizations. And if you want to kind of compare a little bit, we have 4,000 members. And as you just heard Chris say, he has 56,000 members. And you know, we're a younger art form, well, not historically, but in terms of school, initially, dance and visual arts were the focus, and most schools had them. So theater and dance have had to kind of elbow their way into the system. And we certainly, the one thing about this joint venture is that we really work with each other now and we help each other. So I can be the smallest, be in charge of the smallest organization, but it's really the support I get from the other arts organizations is amazing. We feel that it is important to approach advocacy not only from the national level, but also at the state and local levels. We have encouraged our 23 state affiliates, unfortunately, we don't have them in every state, to have an advocacy position on their board. Because we don't have the pressure of constantly promoting advocacy at the national level, we are now able to concentrate on promoting local advocacy. So what does that mean? NDEO members come from a variety of sectors, including higher education, pre-K through 12, performing arts organizations, which includes teaching artists, and private dance studios. Because of that, we feel it is important to give us, these individual entities, the tools to create their own advocacy materials. Some strategies and advice we give include developing one-page handouts, speaking at public forums, promoting performances, having students serve as docents of their learning by sharing student work and explaining what they have learned, educating peers about what dance education can do for students. Why is it important to provide the opportunity for dance education? I'd like to relate advocacy efforts to marketing. It could be your studio, your school program, or your dance company. Promoting the value of dance education not only helps your program, but helps to spread the word locally, statewide, and eventually nationally. It should be a coordinated effort. Creating the small advocacy networks is our next steps to ensure that we are getting the word out at all levels. Sure, marketing is about selling things. If you think about it, we are basically selling dance education and the value that it holds for those involved. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have when we have our open conversation.
Thanks, Sue. I will briefly talk a little bit about the EDTA and the Educational Theater Association, Educational Theater Foundation. I won't read you our vision and our mission, but just to elevate for you that also just finished strategic planning and advocacy is one of the three main goals that we have identified, specifically to Sue's point around amplifying the value of educational theater. We hear a lot, and a lot of you said that in the chats at the beginning, you're here for those nuggets, right? We know that quality advocacy happens when you can take the numbers and the heart in the story and put them together. And that's your most compelling argument when you're in front of somebody. We're always talking about these elevated, right? It comes in a 1,000 different forms. And so one of the things that I know all of us are committed to is providing you the most up-to-date research and amplifying and giving you those sound bites so that you can grab those and apply them to whomever you're talking to. If it's your superintendent, your principal, your congressperson, that's something that I know EDTA is really committed to, and I know that my colleagues at the other organizations are as well. Just a thing specific to what theater education is working on. So we do have 44 chapters, which represent 44 of the states in the United States. And each of those send representatives to what we call our Advocacy Leadership Network. And it's a group of folks that, just like you all, that are interested in how to do this work well, We provide them with the information that's happening at the national level, and we support them at the local level. And so if being part of those conversations is of interest to people, that's another resource for you. I know the other organizations have similar programs at their association. The other thing that's helpful is that when you have a cause, which I'll talk about in a moment, it's a way for the national organization to come and back you and support you in those. So through our advocacy leadership network, we do National Hill Days, and we also really put a lot of effort in supporting our students to be student advocates. And how do we support our students to find their voice? I know in theater in particular, that's a large part of the work that we do, is helping students know the value of their voice. And we believe advocacy is another avenue for that work. So we have a lot of curriculum on that. So if that's something your organization is interested in, our website has a lot of that information. The most important thing that we've been working on right now at EDTA is around censorship. So we conducted a survey last year, and those are the percentages on the bottom. We asked our members a variety of questions, and 85% of our theater teachers that we surveyed were concerned about being censored. And we define censored as either being asked directly to cancel a school show, being told directly not to read or produce or direct a piece of theater in their classrooms or on their stages. So 6% were asked directly, you have to shut that down, and probably have heard some of those stories, which I'll talk about in a minute. 67% are self-censoring. They're not even going to touch material knowing that it would probably be banned by their principal, superintendent, school administration in some fashion. And 85% are concerned about it. We did this survey last year. We heard from a lot of teachers who are kind of reading the tea leaves of the national conversation and are really concerned that this is the way that their school districts are going. We are in the process of putting out this survey again, and we'll be able to compare those numbers to see how we're faring across the nation. So unfortunately, there are a lot of states, Chris referred to this, that are kind of colloquially referred to as anti-drag bills. And what we're seeing with those is the unintended consequence on theater's programs specifically. Many, in again, broad strokes, these bills are saying that you cannot perform a character that does not comply with your birth gender. So most common, right? Female identifying playing Newsies, which is often a male identifying character. That would be against the law right now in many states based on some of the bills that they have or bills that are being proposed. And so unfortunately, a lot of theater programs are seeing the consequence of this, and school districts are shutting plays down 2 weeks before opening night, at opening night, a day before opening night, once they catch word of something happening. And so EDTA is coming out strong with our anti-censorship statement every time we see one of these, and it has been vetted and we are ensured that there is censorship occurring. We've been advocating on behalf of the teachers. If you go to if you know of a censorship that is happening, we have a resource for folks to report it. And then we kind of send our national voice to those and start petitions. And we are part of a large conversation. We are not spearheading this by any means, but most of those plays do get overturned and the productions are able to happen. And that's one area where the National Association is able to have that weight. And so that's one way that we see that we advocate very heavily for our local schools. I can take questions on that in a moment when we open up for questions, but I will let Mario close this out.
Excellent. Hello again. You know, as I listen to my colleagues walk us through each of their organizations, you know, you might be asking yourself, you know, in your local setting, how are the nationals useful and relevant to you? And one of the things, you know, I think Jen just hit on it, is we have really libraries of strong vetted statements and positions. So when you are stuck for the language to make the case to continue your program, or you're looking for that citation, each of our organizations and websites have processes for member vetted, member voiced positions. So I really urge you, you'll get our contact in our websites at the end of this presentation. You might be interested in that. And, you know, when, you know, I talked about the CAN grant earlier, the Connected Arts Networks, we did a town hall and we asked district art supervisors across the country what would be most useful to land in that toolkit for them to support the arts back in their own school districts. And what we heard is that having a national reference point or national data or national voice really can matter. I just talked to a district supervisor that was working to restructure student to teacher ratios and really work on position and personnel and funding formulas. And sometimes locally, you don't know where to go. And oftentimes we have those sort of benchmarks and those resources available. So anyways, as we look at NAEA's couple slides here, like my colleagues, you can see our strategy has many similar pillars. So for us, when we worked on this in 2020 for a 2021 start, my organization had already had a task force on equity, diversity, inclusion that had put forward a set of recommendations. When we talked to thousands of members about what they wanted to really have front and center to tackle for our work and to uplift, we heard that ED&I, equity, diversity, inclusion, was both a standalone pillar of the work that deserved its own attention, but it was also one that we wanted to see embedded and threaded throughout. So we call it our super pillar. And you can see that it's embedded across our learning, our research knowledge, our advocacy policy, and our community vibrancy. When you look at any of our language, it's really that similar to colleagues, we want to remove any barriers to access for whatever reason, historically or currently, that someone may not be able to access arts learning or arts professional development. We want to make sure that we're working to broaden our reach and welcome all of our community in. The next two slides just give you a snapshot of some of the work that we're doing. This first one, this is looks very oversimplified because there's years of work behind this. But like I said, our ED&I task force put forth these 16 recommendations. And the first one was to establish a standing commission. So we have a standing equity, diversity, inclusion commission that's been working similarly to really thoroughly review and recommend action to make us a more inclusive organization. And at the heart, we're all learning organizations. So we're constantly evolving and developing. And not all that growth is easy, but we're really proud that out of the 16 recommendations, we've got 14 of them that are pretty well in motion and 2 more that we're working to tackle. The next slide, similar to our music colleagues, we just completed a year-long task force focused on art teacher recruitment and retention. My board just passed the recommendations and report a couple weeks ago in April. And so this just talks through our short, mid, and long-term goals. But a lot of this, when you look at this, you'll see that it's about adding strategy, storytelling, marketing, and advocacy to this work. How do we strengthen the message that an arts education across art forms is essential? We're not the extras, we're not the preps, we're not the specials, we're not the add-ons. I think my school called it the core and the encore. I say, forget all that, we're essential. And so how do we take steps to make those things essential? And so we're really here, I think, with an invitation to partner and support as best as we can. I think we are ready to, yep, here's our contact information, which we'll leave up. And I think Jen's probably going to guide us through some Q&A here.
Yeah, we will share these slides, but here are our emails and our websites if folks have more directed questions. I'm going to stop sharing and see and open it up now for questions. People can either put it in the chat, which I'm seeing one now, or raise a hand. We're all pinned, so I can't actually see anybody. So Kenzie, maybe you can help me if there's folks that I'm just reading Christopher's question. So Christopher asks, how can the teaching artist who may be giving a start to being a teaching artist actually gain some sense of advantage and validation with some of the knowledge discussed today? Are they part of today's story? How? Should they have some affiliation with national arts disciplines, education organizations? Can they afford to? So I don't know. I don't know if this answers the question, but I'll take my first stab and then I'll toss it to my colleagues. But absolutely, the teaching artists are our associations are open to educators. And so teaching artists would certainly fall into those categories. I know at EDTA for sure. And I think, one of the things that we're all speaking to is that where advocacy is oftentimes very directed at, we're going to sign on to the Inclusive Arts Education Act because we feel that's important. We're all taking a holistic view of advocacy to say there's so much research that needs to be done, and we all want to amplify the value of the art form and arts education in general. And so anyone who teaches the art form would be included in that. So I'll let others speak to that. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, go ahead, Sue.
I agree. We really have to, for our organization, we use a lot of teaching artists because we really value that that combination of having a certified teacher and a local arts organization, a dance company to come and work with our students, come and work in our after-school programs. But the reality, it's another reason it's so important is you couldn't find enough certified dance educators at this point in time to be able to actually service all the schools. So we are always trying to uplifting all dance educators, no matter where they are serving and how they are serving, because that's important. We need to provide that services. We provide professional development, but we also provide the opportunities to share the fact that they are important. Teaching artists are important.
Yeah, I think I would go back to that shared endeavor graphic that we had earlier, which really, it takes me back to the when I was the director of arts for Chicago Public Schools. We were working on a strategic arts plan. We met with a focus group of principals. I realized immediately that I was so much further along in my arts understanding of vocabulary that we had to back it up, because the principals that we were speaking with, they were equating a full-time certified on staff there every day in the building arts educator with a one-time field trip, with a 3-week artist residency, they were just thinking of it all as having the same impact and value. And so what we really did was take time to say each sort of arts intervention, for lack of a better term, has its own unique benefits and maybe its own unique reason for being in that format. So I think, everyone plays a specific role, and sometimes our community-based teaching artists can bring depth and can bring real life perspective and can bring a connection to the arts and creative world and community that our students are so hungry for. And we see really strong partnerships, I think, happen in schools, during the school day, after school. And so, I think we're moving away from, this or that sort of dichotomy of one or the other, and saying that a healthy arts education ecosystem includes all these players at the table. And we're trying to inform and uplift each of those roles. So I really appreciate the question. And like Jen said, each of our organizations has community-based teaching artists as part of our communities as well.
I completely echo that sentiment. I remember the conversations about a shared endeavor when it was being authored, and the importance of all these different components and how they work together. Obviously, at NAFME, we believe strongly in that certified music educator in the classroom. There can be a tremendous partnership between a music educator in the classroom and a teaching artist, and what a teaching artist can bring to that conversation and do for children. Thank you.
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm frozen. Can you hear me, Mario? Oh, you can.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
But if anybody wants to put another, thanks, Kim. If anyone wants to put another question in the chat, or if anybody has a hand raised, Kinsey, I can't see any people.
I don't see any hands at the moment, but if I do, I'll
Okay.
call out and let you know.
Okay.
I'm going back through the chat just to see if there were any earlier questions. Seems like sources, new perspectives on advocacy. I think we touched a lot of this. What's happening at the federal level, how to get involved.
I do see a hand now.
Great.
Lee Wells, you're welcome to come off of mute and ask a question. If you turn your video on, I'll spotlight you as well, but you don't have to do that.
Hi, thanks, Kinsey. This is Lee. I was just going to follow up on the censorship piece. I was wondering, like, typically when that plays out, is that like hyper-local advocacy with specific like school or community, or more so at the like state level or city level? I was just curious what kind of more detail about what that's been like in terms of
Sure.
interventions in that scenario.
Sure. And
Thanks.
if you can't, Mario, if you no longer can hear me, you let me know, okay? But my screen is being strange. So the most recent one, or one of the most recent ones, unfortunately, they happen quite often. It was in Oklahoma. I mean, it was in Texas around a production of Oklahoma. And so that was very national. You know, they contacted us. They were a thespian troupe. And it was in all the local papers. And we really tried to put pressure on their local school district. So it does happen at the very local level, because typically it's the superintendent or the principal or the school district that is canceling the show. But we have really tried to elevate each of those to a very national level, because we believe that each time they're doing that, and most of the times it is around an LGBTQIA topic, that the message has been sent. So once the show is canceled or even called into question, the message has been sent to the school and the community and the students that there's something wrong here, that there is some reason why this can't be put out into the public. And so after a few days, when the show is reinstated, that damage has already been done. And so we really try to put some, call to action around those adults to have further conversations. It's not enough just to allow the show to go back up. And we are working with, licensing our partners at this level on what other ways that they can do that, playwrights of the play that might be in question. So the censorship issues really have gone from the local, state, and national level. You are seeing some very funny images of me being frozen. So thank you for enduring my talking with these pictures of my face freezing and funny photos. Thank you, Lee. And Mario, you see that question from Krista about CAN?
Yeah, I answered in the chat, but Krista, thanks for I loved your thinking around AEP, Arts Education Partners, has all that research and policy resources available. And when we talk about the CAN grant, it's like we're putting all of that research and policy into action, which I think is just a great way to think about that. It really is a sort of a learning lab, and we're really thrilled to be able to disseminate all that we're learning in the future. And we also we might not have initially put it under the idea of advocacy, but it's definitely a policy focus, which is currently those CAN teacher leaders have submitted journal submissions for the Arts Education Policy Review Journal. And so those are currently being edited, and we're looking for a special issue to come out. I think they're working on it right now. So sometime later this year, that'll come out, but it's from each art form's perspective of practitioners on the ground, thinking about how their work in action actually leads to policy outcomes, impact, difference. So we're really excited that that'll be coming out from teachers' voices.
That's great. There's 2 questions in the chat. I seem to be back in real time now. So Angelica, I know that you wrote, with all the censorship that's happening, what are ways that we can get students involved? And so the students really, I mean, as always, right? The students never cease to amaze us or surprise us or come through, but they have really been, when we see these censorship issues happening, the students are the ones rallying around, advocating, going back to the board of ed meetings, and the ones really advocating, and what they're using is the language on why the arts are important. They're not saying we want our show to be up, we work so hard. I mean, that's part of it, but what they're really advocating around is the experience that they're having and the lessons that they're learning. And so on the EDTA side, that's what we're really leading with, and those are the resources that we have, is what is the value of a theater education, what are they gaining from that? And then, like I said before, what are what are they getting when you through this action? What's the inverse experience that those adults are having on the students? And it's been very powerful. They've been going in and sitting and giving testimonies. And Devin has a question for you, Mario, that I think is linked, is how do we support the admins so that they understand the shows that are being produced, what's happening, I know specifically in visual arts, but you spoke about the principals in Chicago. So Devin has a question about that.
Yeah, Devin, great question. Just for the group, how do you support principals' learning and professional development and their deeper understanding of visual arts, dance, music, theater, education, media arts? I'm going to give two answers. So one is, I was lucky to be in a position of influence in Chicago. So when we were doing listening tours and talking to folks about how do we make difference in dance? Yep, thank you. How do you really make an impact, and how do you ensure that decision makers can uphold the value of the arts? And one of my great principal colleagues said, Mario, if you want us to care about the arts, put the arts on the scorecard. We need some accountability. And so we did two things. We created a simple set of definitions and terms that went with their budget documents, just to say, here's how you may understand all these various positions, art forms, scheduling, all the things that went with the arts. And principal said, oh, no one has ever set a bar or a standard or a minimum threshold that we needed to meet. If you could provide that guidance, it'd be really helpful. And then we made sure the arts were on the scorecard alongside academics and alongside the sort of environment, the health and environment of the school. And that really helped to change things. I think it's really about partnering with the district leadership to ensure that any leadership, professional development, or training includes the arts. One of the strategies that my colleagues and I often will support or communicate to our teachers on the ground is every school has a school improvement plan. Every school should have a school leadership team. Is there an arts person on that school leadership team? And is the arts included in that school improvement plan? Because that's really the strategic plan for the school that guides all the budget and other decisions. So those are ways to ensure that there's a higher value. And I think as a community member or a community-based teaching artist, there are ways to work alongside folks in the system. There are ways to work with parent-teacher organizations, with school board members showing up at school board meetings. Because, again, it takes every voice to constantly be beating this drum so that we're both loud and frequent in our work to do capital A and lowercase a advocacy all the time. Great question, Devin. Thank you.
Sue or Chris, anything to add?
Just going back to the topic of, what was referred to as censorship in NAFME, we talk about divisive concept laws a lot. We have a resource on the NAFME website that, again, was authored by Karen Salvador and Ryan Shaw. It's called Navigating Divisive Concepts Laws, Resources for PK-12 Music Educators. That's in addition to the research that I mentioned earlier. I would encourage folks to go to the NAFME website and check that out. There's some really helpful information there that is pertinent to the classroom experience right now.
Thanks, Chris. Does anybody else can see it?
No hands at the moment.
Give a minute for final questions and then.
Hey, this is Kim at the Roundtable. I have a quick question. I'm so excited to see all the different legislation that is currently at the federal level. We recognize it at different stages. Are there ways that individuals or organizations can lend their voice or support any of these bills?
Who wants to take that?
I'll be happy to start. So I'm thrilled to get that question. That's always the most exciting question for those of us who have been in the arts advocacy waters for a while, because if you can't bring more people in with you, you're never going to get very far. And I think that the appeal of joining right now is that, as we've discussed today, there is an energy to this movement, all the arts education subject matter disciplines working together. To me, that equals the best chance we have to make a real impact. So what I can say from a NAFME standpoint is that you're all welcome to, again, go to the NAFME website, where we sometimes have action alerts that you can participate in, writing to members of Congress on any bill that's potentially moving, including those that Jen shared with you earlier today. Sometimes we actually put those together in connection with our state affiliates as well. So NAFME has state affiliates, as all the organizations represented here today do. And if they're working on advocacy at the state or local level, we might assist with putting something together. You can then write in and talk to somebody at the state house level rather than a member of Congress about something that's going on maybe in your own backyard. That's one great way to do it. Another way is to literally go up the steps of your state house and meet with a member on your own or in collaboration with a local arts entity. We are 1,000% supportive of that, as we are of you coming to Washington, D.C. and joining us on the Hill when we do that. That's an open invitation, because we think that can be a transformative experience for folks that are, again, just getting in those arts education advocacy waters. There are a lot of different ways to contribute, and I know all four of us and those on our staff that do this work would be delighted to speak with anybody, including you, Kim, that would like to get more involved with that work. So please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I would just add, typically it's an organization that would sign on to something. So I think organizations can get more information. And then as Chris said, we all advocate, during different Hill days. And those are such wonderful times to get read in on what the most current legislation is and get your talking points, and then get in front of your state representatives. So I know the Roundtable does really great work, particularly around New York City. But if folks are interested in getting more involved at the New York State or whatever state you're from level, whatever art form and association that you that makes the most sense for you, we all have a lot of us have chapter representation and state representation, and so that's a good way to extend beyond the work that you're already doing. And we can get you in touch with all those people. I'll give the teacher pause, and then we can. I'll let my colleagues say their final words, but I would just want to thank you all for coming in. I know this is a busy time of year and a busy time of day, and many of you have been working all day or been in front of young people all day. So thanks so much. Thank you to the Roundtable for having us. As we've said all along, it's a really exciting time for arts education, because we are coming together collectively as the national organizations, but also there is some momentum in Washington around seeing the value of the arts. The NEA recently held for the first time a convening and thinking about how the arts impact economy and health. And so folks are starting to see the power and the impact of arts education. So even though there's not a magic wand any one of us can wave to get all the funding that we think is necessary or all the bills to be passed, as we're all continuing to talk about it and repost about it and all these small things, they all do have a collective impact. So thank you all for being here to listen to us and hear what we had to say today. And I'll let Mario, Chris, and Sue say their final words as well.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, thank you very much. I have really enjoyed doing this. Please be in touch anytime. There's always, I answer emails. So, if you need something, let me know. Also, I encourage you to go to our website, because there's a tremendous amount of information on that.
Yep, I echo my colleagues' sentiments. It's really a treat for us to engage with our community. So thank you for taking time and spending with us. And, we know that there are moments in the arts that you can be isolated and really enjoy that. But then there are other times that you are not sure who to turn to for support. And please know, we are truly here to support you. And if it's not us directly, we are happy to connect you to colleagues that might be able to support anything that you're looking for. So really, appreciate your time and energy, and we hope to be in touch with you. Thanks.
I share those sentiments 1,000%. Thank you all for your time. We are so grateful to have been afforded this opportunity to speak with you. And I just can't stress enough that we all want to leave you with the message that the organizations which we represent, the service organizations we represent, are doing the good work of advocating for arts education in Washington, D.C. and across the country. And while you are all working so hard in your classrooms, in your communities, in your own backyards, advocating for the arts, know that we are doing that on the national level and that we are eager to have you involved in that work and in our organizations. So thank you again for everything you do and for having us.
Well said. Thanks. Thanks, Kinsey. Thanks for everything.
Yes, thank you all so much. We're just so thrilled to have had you here. So I can't express how grateful we are that you made the time and spent this time with us today. Just excellent discussion. Thank you for all the information, strategy shared, making sure that we feel like we're not alone, and just sharing, your passion for arts ed and for advocating for it. So y'all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Folks, we hope to see you tomorrow for day 3 of the virtual face-to-face conference, where you can get off at 10 a.m. with Getting the Grant, Beating the Odds. And then we'll reconvene at 4 p.m. for Career Pivot, Teaching Artists to Arts Administrator. You have a link to our full schedule for the conference in the chat. And thank you all so much for being here. You'll hear from us soon.
Great. Thank you.
So.